Hello, and welcome to the Psycho Studios podcast, which today we are reviewing Alien Romulus. And I gotta say, without spoiling it, I gotta say it's pretty low on my books to ever see again. But I gotta tell you, we're gonna be gonna give our reviews first before, I should say our scores, before we dive into spoilers. We're just gonna go straight into it after that and don't hold anything back.
No holding back. Got it.
And so we have a new scale, which is still the same thing, really. But it's 1 to Psycho, Psycho being 10. So hopefully, maybe by the end of this year, we'll be able to still say Psycho for one of these movies. So just to jump right into it, I have the score of 3. And I know what you're thinking. That's below average. Well, I gotta tell you it's because it is. Well, how about you tell us what your score is?
Well, I mean, as Mykal said, it was his is a 3, which is below average. I'm coming in at a 2.5, and that is after rewatching it in a very quiet atmosphere as opposed to the theater. Which overall, the patrons at the theater were pretty solid, but I wanted to make sure, was I really giving this film its due, and I'm coming in at 2.5.
Right. So after that, I guess we'll just jump straight into some facts about the movie, which I think, just give a little background about the movie. So first off, the budget, which was 80 million, and I think that's 80 million too much.
Nice. And of course, side note, that is without the marketing budget.
Right. Which I'm sure maybe was another 40 million?
It's crazy when you do get some insight into marketing budgets, they are astronomical.
Right. Just as much as the movie sometimes, or more.
Good point.
So the box office numbers currently is at 290 million. So shows you how much I know about making movies, right?
Hey, include me in that.
Right. So I gotta say, it's definitely made its money back, and it's obviously only going to continue to gross more. And I had rewatched it to do this review.
Did you? Yeah.
I did. And gotta say, it's still just as bad. I would almost want to change my score, but I stuck to it. I almost wanted to give it 2 or 1.
Got it.
2.5.
There you go. Copycat.
Yeah, that's what it was. But anyways, I gotta say, it's just, I don't know. Short summary, I just felt like that it was the best of the Aliens franchise. So after that, let's just go into saying that this was directed by who?
So if I'm saying his name correctly, it's Fede Alvarez.
Right, which he was the writer, producer, and director.
Yeah, you were saying how he was wearing all those hats, and we're seeing that more and more with the Hollywood movies.
Right, and I don't know how that's possible because Evil Dead franchise is definitely near and dear to my heart. He actually did a reimagine in 2013 of Evil Dead, and wow, that turned it up. That franchise was already bloody and gory, besides Army of Darkness. But man, did he make that violent and over the top? Just what it needed, I think. But anyways, he also wrote and directed that and produced it. And it's hard to say that I don't know what happened from 2013 to 2024. What happened between that? But it's sad to say that he, well, at least for me, lost my interest in him directing anything else.
Well, and I remember you turning me on to that Evil Dead Reimagined, or whatever you want to call it, because I try to stay away from those because they fall flat, and I was really impressed. He also did Don't Breathe, didn't he?
Right, yes.
And I know that's a small film, but I really enjoyed that, and I tried to come in with level expectations, and obviously, like you said, the audiences are out there. We're probably going to crest 300 million gross revenue.
Oh, yeah.
So they're liking it, and I'm trying to stay on point as far as facts. I mean, the facts is that you and I, as far as our scores go, we didn't enjoy it. No. And it was almost painful to rewatch it.
Right.
But the audiences, with the fact that it's going to gross that much, I still think that boils down to the audiences are starved for horror, new horror, and of course science fiction as well.
Right, totally. And so we had talked about it before. I think I even mentioned it when we were going to go see it. But this movie takes place between when?
So from what we've heard is Alien and Aliens. It's supposed to be wedged in between those two. So not really a sequel or a prequel. It's kind of an amalgamation of the two.
And I can't tell you that I have any idea how that works in there, but I'm not going to even try to think of that. And then to think that Hulu was going to be the one that was just going to release it online, and that's kind of crazy to think about that. It was just going to go streaming like that. I believe it's called Predator Prey or Prey Predator, whatever. Or
I think it's
Prey.
just Prey. Prey, it's good.
Yeah, and I thought it was pretty good, just for the sake of the fact that different setting, different environment, and I'll go into some tropes that I had with that movie that definitely align exactly with this movie, which was so silly. And this made me appreciate even further Alien Covenant. Like, that was Ridley Scott still.
Sure.
And he was trying to give some filler and backstory, and it was doing something different.
Right.
Where this movie didn't. So, I don't know if you have any other facts that you want to fill in there, or if we just want to get into the beginning of the movie and kind of breaking down the movie.
You know how I start to itch when I can't give at least a few facts? And you already gave me that one. You shared it with me when you said that it was going to possibly go right to Hulu, and whoever was going to make that decision, they might not be working there anymore, because clearly it was the right move to put it as a theatrical release.
Totally.
Some of the other details, and you already said, set between Alien and Aliens. Something that I thought was interesting is that Fadi, and I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, but the director reached out to James Cameron as well as Ridley Scott, and he was basically asking them for some notes after he shared how the movie was going to look, and they both gave him a thumbs up. And I have a lot of respect for Ridley Scott and James Cameron, so maybe they understood differently than we do, because they could see this is going to be a commercial success. There wasn't a lot of other filler behind that, but I was surprised to see that. It was shot in Budapest. So I found that interesting too, and maybe Budapest is going to be the new Canada. But it's interesting to me that it was shot there. And also, you talked about a heavy use of practical effects. So when you talk about that, you say they really wanted to rely on practical effects. Does that mean when we see the ships and all that, are those just models? What's your take on that? I'm interested.
I think from the organisms that we're seeing, along with definitely the ships and that done practically like it used to be, projections of stuff like on that level. So just relying on the computer to fill in the blanks.
All right, and then also a tidbit which when I rewatched it, and I did happen to rewatch Alien and Aliens, there was talk about the color palette and how in Alien and Aliens there was a very blue-like hue running throughout the film, whereas Fadi decided that he was going to go with an orange hue. And when I rewatched it, it's interesting, but I did see that. From your knowledge, does that mean that they're using some sort of filter to give that cast?
From the lighting to a filter, I'm sure.
Got it. Also, what's interesting to me is that we talk about Ian Holm, so rest in peace. He's the actor who played the original synthetic, as they say, in Alien.
Right, I was going to... Obviously, this is spoilers, but I was going to go into that in the order of the movie.
We'll save that for spoilers. Critics have overall given this film a thumbs up. I know that's very broad to say, but between the critics and the revenue it's generating, clearly there's fans as well as the critics are enjoying it. And also, not to rehash the first two films, but I really feel that that's what this was. And I think you even used that term, rehash.
Well, I said it's I think it's Alien's best. So, like, the best of. So
Nice.
It's just like a bunch of the Alien movies meshed into this movie.
Sure. No, that's a great way to put it. So those are the facts, at least off the top of my tongue.
Cool. We'll just get right into the movie then.
Go for it.
So, I mean, the movie starts off as I was like, oh, this is definitely going to be okay. I still don't know. There's no dialogue, but it's quiet. There's nothing. The good old ship scene, right? and then it goes into them being on a planet, which we're not used to really seeing in the franchise. It's more about the outer space, or I mean, eventually they make it to a planet, but it kind of seemed like Earth, and then it gave like this sense of reality, and it seemed nice at first, but then you heard as soon as they started speaking their dialogue, man, I was just taken out of there, and I was counting the seconds until I could get out of there. It seemed like, but the plot's very silly. So they're on this planet, and how they make their wages or to live is to do work. Go figure.
They get credits, right?
Credits,
Yeah.
and they were wanting to get off planet, but they're denied. So the main character and what seemed to be her brother, but we find out is definitely an android,
Synthetic, yeah.
synthetic, and she's denied access to leave the planet, even though she was, told, and it was like equivalent of 10 more years that she had to wait.
Yeah, she turns in her paperwork, right? And they just deny her.
Right. And I'm just like, okay, where is this going? And then, of course, she teams up with some old friends. And it's okay. This cast it's a younger cast, and I think that's fine, especially if they were going to try to make another movie to coincide with this. Which,
Sure.
no doubt that's going to be a thing. And unfortunately, it didn't flow very well. But anyways, to get back on track, they all talk about how there seems to be this space carrier that's floating in outer space right above them, and then they're all going to sneak up there to get the pods so they could go to another planet really far away. So that's just the basic plot. And I think, but that's not doing anything different. It's sure they want to get somewhere, right? But we all want to get somewhere. I guess that's where we're all, can find interest in that. But they get onto that big space station.
Yeah, it's a stranded ship, right? It's just been floating out in the orbit.
And so, but they're all scared because they're being given this information that it's going to be heading into the rings of Saturn, right? And then obviously the ship's going to be destroyed, but it's going to be no big deal because they're going to be in and out of there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, lickety split.
And so from there, you can tell it's all going to go downhill. And so the visuals there, beautiful. The soundtrack, I think, was definitely the biggest standout, but it still seemed very reused, not original. And then when they go, I think I was very tired of the face huggers. The one scene where the face huggers were in the water and the tension, and I don't know, he had an accent when he was saying water. It just seemed so silly. Like, it seemed like, why was that in there? I don't know. It seemed kind of obnoxious. And then they finally come across an android that looked like he had been acid through by one of the aliens, of course. And why? Why, as you were alluding to earlier, why did they reuse? He had passed away, unfortunately, in 2020. Why did they reuse the likeness of who?
Ian Holm.
Right. And when it could have been any android. It was uncanny valley, and it really took me out of there. And you can tell it wasn't his performance of who he is, because he's a great character actor.
Oh, man. We could have a whole podcast on that alone. He really was.
I loved him in the Lord of the Rings movies. Anyways.
The Tarzan, Lord of the Apes.
Right. He's, plethora of movies.
Absolutely.
But they could have got a classically trained actor. Could have been anyone, right? Seriously. But I guess they did get the blessing from the family. I have nothing to say against that. But I don't know how that honors or makes the name. I think that's just one of the things about this movie that tries to reel in the alien crowd. Like, oh yeah.
Yeah,
I know
there
who
he
that
is.
is.
That's the first synthetic. Well, and what's interesting is the character's name in Alien is Bishop.
Right.
But online, a lot of talk about that, and a lot of people, I don't want to assume your opinion, but that seemed the least real looking element within the film.
Right.
But they were calling him Rook.
Right, exactly. So the reason why they're calling him Rook is because it's not the same android.
Got it.
That's what's so confusing if you're a real
Okay,
Alien
I was
fan.
confused. Thank you.
No, because then you think they're on the ship, but that ship definitely blew up in the first Aliens movie, right?
Great point.
So the biggest problem is that's what confused me too, but I started to realize, well, I think they're just, for some reason, using his face and voice to just bring familiarity because they're definitely not the same thing.
Do you think they even did it just out of a technical aspect? Look at what we can do.
No?
No.
Because I feel like that's the most heavy CGI that they did, and it doesn't even look good.
It
like
does,
it takes you so out of there, especially if you're a fan. I bet how many people that watched it that weren't an Alien fan like didn't even know.
Right. No, that's a good point. As a fresh audience, but if you're a core fan, you're like, what the heck is that? And side note to those chess fans out there, but a bishop and rook are names of the little tokens within a chess game, right? So thank you for clarifying that.
They were still using that, the frame, but it was just different.
Got it.
So it's really unfortunate because, again, that's one of the bigger things that made me feel like this was a best of compilation of the Alien films. Just too many familiar elements being reused and overused callbacks and practical tropes. I mean, come on. The face huggers, I know that's iconic, but this, you could use something else. Like at the end, they use something different. So why not use the face huggers, be slightly modified or different, and they do something different? What if I know it's the movie trope of the aliens' acid blood, but what if it was completely different? Why not try to change or make it unique? It's your own film. Yeah. And it can still be in the Alien universe. There's so much to play with.
Sure. Oh, it's endless.
And that's what makes me really want to have Ridley Scott finish his... It was supposed to be a trilogy, but those movies didn't do well. So the two films he most recently did in the franchise, they didn't...
That includes Prometheus?
Right.
Got it.
So... But it gives me more appreciation for those movies. And this makes even Alien 3 that much better, for my opinion.
Alien 3. Don't get me started. I know Michael wants to keep me on point, and he brings up great points, and then it's hard for me to stay on point. But yeah, I remember Alien 3, seeing it at the theater, and that was a tough watch.
I don't know where this falls exactly in the timeline of the movie, but since we're on the same subject of like the just callbacks or things that shouldn't be in place. So the Andy, the android.
Right, her supposed brother. Right.
Just for no reason whatsoever says that iconic line like, stay away from her, you bitch.
Yeah, like, you got to get that in there.
Almost like looks at the camera, almost. Like
tongue in cheek.
It's like terrifying too. So what? Why? Like, who? But it made me laugh at the theater because I'm just like, that's so fucking goofy. Like, who asked for that? But I'm serious. Like, it doesn't even make sense. And it just, there's no context. There was nothing to bring that. Like, why would he know that? And then one of the scenes, it's midway through the movie and they're, walking through the corridor and they have to be all really quiet, and it's so silly. And then how that pays off is that another scene that just so overused, that droid in that, we can't open that door because you're gonna die, right? Like, how many times is that done? We can't open that door.
I'm gonna police that. We can't sacrifice the whole for just one part.
Right. It's just, why? How many times is that done?
100.
Right.
Easily. No, I get it. Yeah, I guess the android's name is Andy, right? And he's supposedly
Andy the android.
And he's supposedly her brother, and we see it at the beginning of the film when she's turning in her paperwork, and he's outside, and she's like, "Just stay put." And then, of course, he gets attacked,
right, by
a bunch of hoodlums, and he's got the white, milky substance. Oh, he's an android, right? It was so telling.
Like, that should have been a mystery. Like, I should have been so blatant about it right away. Like, that would have been the best, in my opinion. But it's just unfortunate. So many of those things just so unfortunate. But I gotta say, the pacing's really bad, and I was so glad when, of course, what's going to happen? Instead of the ship blowing up, it's going to be sucked into the rings and then blow up, right? But there's a countdown, go figure, of when that's going to happen. And that did align with how much minutes were left in the movie. And I was so thankful that I was getting reminded when that was going to be over.
It's almost over. Well, and you mentioned that about the Jupiter rings, right? And I thought visually that was a cool point, right? That you're seeing those rings rotate, and they're eventually going to crash into those rings, and we can only imagine that's going to disintegrate them.
Right.
So I thought that was a good dramatic effect, but then they can't just let it peter out like it's no big deal. Whereas you would think that would have built excitement.
No, that I think the tension was not there.
No, that's a great point. And we don't cover our notes together, so it is interesting to hear how we land on these things. And you're right. Where was the tension there? It should have been insane.
Right. It should have been like the end all be all. And they didn't. I didn't even feel like they felt the gravity of the situation.
Well, I had slamming into the rings as part of my notes, and I'm like, we wait for what? It just, the lack of tension. What is it? Are we just too smart for movies? What's the deal?
I don't think so. Most audience just, the visual effects, and the story doesn't have to be that great, I guess. That's really unfortunate.
Can I just pepper through a few elements like you were?
Sure.
So I think, to me, another piece, and as Mykal said, this is spoiler alerts to say the least, but when they turn off the gravity element and they shoot the alien creatures, and then their blood, which we know as acid, is just floating in these globs, I'm sorry, there's no practicality to that at all. It doesn't make any sense. There's no way they could avoid it, gravity or not. There's acid for blood everywhere.
They did it because it looked cool. It looked cool, but it didn't make sense, and there's no probability.
Okay, I know.
It would have went everywhere.
I know. I want to suspend disbelief, and I think I do, but there's no belief. How about the pregnancy scene? So, they do that earlier scene where which William Hurt, I think was his name, or is it John Hurt? John Hurt, where the alien creature, right? How many times have we seen that iconic feature of that creature breaking through their chest, right?
Right.
So we knew that was coming. I mean, there was no way they were going to make that movie without showing that. But then we fast forward to the part where that one character is pregnant, and I felt, again, I'm not against gore, right? We love the horror genre, and gore in its rightful place is, that's reality. But it just seemed like it was so forced. We have to show her delivering whatever she's delivering, and it reminded me of Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead.
We're not going exactly in order, so I would just like to interrupt that with the fact that we should rewind and talk about they introduced from Prometheus the black goo. And
Tell us about the black goo.
So that was, supposed to be the cure or to evolve humans, and it wasn't. But the android that was stuck on the ship was able to get Andy mind control with the chip that he was put into his system.
Oh yes, please.
And became smart. And then there was this black goo, and the woman that was pregnant unfortunately got really badly wounded, even though she probably could have made the ship and everything would have been fine.
Right, because she said, let's get you in one of those pods, right?
Right. But anyways, she, for some reason, feels the urgency to stab herself with that black goo because she heard what the android said. It was just getting to her, I guess. And then, of course, she's going to have a pregnancy.
No, you're right. And I'm sorry I went out of line, because you're right. The black goo, the injections, it was going to, fix them. You almost look at the company mandate. You talked about the way that Andy was basically, he gets that new, is it a disc that they put in?
Yeah.
And that is a great call out, because he is before that disc change. So with him being technically a machine, his handler, the main character, right, supposedly his sister, wants to, well, she doesn't want to. She knows she has to update that disc or change out the disc so he can have access to that ship element, right?
Right,
And
exactly.
to get into that one room.
Yeah.
And that's a great call out because she changes out the disc, and of course then it does give him access at a high level. And then he's got a completely different temperament, right?
Right.
He's smarter and wouldn't you even say stronger, or
Right.
at least more knowledgeable?
Well, it's unlocked what his
right,
true
all his
potential.
abilities, right? True potential. That's a great way to put it. And he's very protective at that point because now he's got the company or corporate mandate.
Right.
Right. And do you want to take off where I'm going with that, or do you want me to just finish that thought?
Let's go for it.
So when she goes to try to change out the disc, right, because she sees how it is changing him, and for her, at least from her eyes, not for the better, he's not going to let her, right? He's now a corporate machine,
Right.
and he can't let anything disrupt that. But then later on, he just easily succumbs to that. I don't know.
It seemed like they were just trying to say he was teetering, and his true self was still reaching through, and so I think they were just playing off as that he knew that it was the right thing still. Like there was some kind of consciousness still in him.
Oh, that's a good point. So that helps me a little bit. Maybe I'll go 2.75 then instead of 2.5.
But I guess we're gonna go towards wrapping this up, so we can talk about what happens after that pregnancy scene.
Yeah, and so my bad. I didn't mean to jump ahead there, but the pregnancy scene where she delivers that entity, I don't know
Right.
what else to call it, and it just seemed like it was so forced, and I thought it was the goriest part of the movie. And they at that point they had completely lost me. It sounds like maybe they lost you a little bit earlier.
Well, I don't totally, but I just don't understand how that thing was already like as tall as Iron Giant. But believe it or not, he was all practical effects.
Really?
Yes. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's impressive, even though I thought that was fake. But then in Save,
It was
with
impressive.
the last part of the movie, super dark, can barely see what's going on. And that was on purpose. Okay? So all the Predator and Alien movies after the first one and Aliens have been shrouded in problems with lighting. And you look into the facts of the history on that, it's pretty interesting, especially with the AVP movies. They've had all those issues with the director fighting production or the company behind it. It's so silly. Like they'll fix it in post, stuff like that, and it's unfortunate, but you can barely see what's going on. But anyway, she gives birth to a creature that is ginormous, like tall, kind of Promethean-ish.
Right, it's got that face, right?
Which I'm sure that's the engineer is what he kind of looked like.
Okay.
Mixed in with human, mixed in with the alien part, the xenomorph as they call it.
Nice, good call, xenomorph.
And so I don't know what they were going by that. Like, again, the alien trope where they didn't get out unscathed, and God just throw in the fact that she had that baby and it turned out to be him. And then the last, survivor girl that's with it has to eject the alien out of the ship somehow.
Oh,
and it's just,
that sounds familiar.
that's the stakes of the end of the movie. Like, wow. And then, of course, he's able to not escape, and she ejects him out of the ship. And it visually, it was kind of cool, even though it was really dark, was, the ship kind of getting seared and blown up by the rings. I mean, all that was cool. It's just the surrounding material was good, but it just, unfortunately, to wrap up my end of the whole thing, is just what I took away is that unnecessary movie that was not needed for me. These are just my opinions.
Yeah, 290 million, right?
Right. And it really needed to really bring more to the table. And that's what's so wrong with some movies out today. Making multiple movies from the same franchise, rebooting, continuing. There's some good ways to do that. Just like I thought I had faith because he did the 2013 Evil Dead. But here we are. But hey, might be not for me, but it's many for others. So please still check it out for yourself and make your own opinion. But I still think if you're a hardcore alien movie fanatic, you're gonna give a 5 or less. So
That's a bold take, that's for sure. No, I get it. What you're saying, and interesting when you're talking about the darkness, even. So you're saying that that was a common theme with a handful of the movies post Aliens,
right.
and so what they're saying that the director didn't know it was too dark, or
No, that they knew that it was gonna be this way, and they were trying to make it kind of scary. So it was,
Got it.
hiding effects, yada yada, and fixing a post, still problems. And it's silly.
got it. No, especially in this day and age, it's silly.
But
It-
this movie was done purposely.
Okay, purposely. That makes that even more interesting. So I guess for my wrap up as well, I what the way that you had the movie unfolding, which is what we saw, was for me it was kind of a space or train wreck, as it were. And it was the pregnancy scene, and it was coming out of that, and even the way the main character gets into that suit, just like Ripley did.
Right.
And we know that the resolution there was the fact that she knew, the main character, she needed to get jettisoned to that planet that she initially submitted the papers for at the beginning of the film. And she wanted to take Andy with her.
Right.
And the only thing missing, and I really thought they were going to do it, was a cat. I thought for sure there'd be some small animal.
Hey, that was not the trope that they wanted to bring
No,
back.
I was very surprised, but I felt fairly good about that element. I think when we break it down, and I know you want to wrap this up, but when we think about the dialogue, the story, the fact that from what we know, and this is printed even on their studio site, that it's supposed to be set between Alien and Aliens, and you have all that foundational information, you would just think they would have gone to a more creative and original.
It would have been a home run.
It's such a great story, and that creature is one of the most, xenomorph?
Yeah.
Xenomorph? Just one of the greatest horrific science fiction creatures of all time. You can't break anything through as far as its weakness.
Well, I'm gonna put this out there. Hopefully that the show that's gonna come out next year, I bet that's supposed to be not coinciding with this, but it's gonna be on Earth. That there's gonna be some mixing around of formula and stuff. So I'm not saying I have hope, but it'll be at least a different setting.
And that'll be what, as far as you know, a limited TV series?
A limited TV series on Hulu.
Wow. Okay, there's Hulu coming full circle.
Right.
I'm just gonna say real quick, dialogue, story, acting, even the effects, the way they used them. I'm using the word all right. Everything was all right.
That's the score you give it. So
But right, that does ultimately bleed us into that score, and I wanted more. I think I was suspect, and then I'll shut up. But I was suspect at the very beginning when even the credits, they were basically a rip-off is probably a strong term, but they were identical almost to the first two movies. It's like, in this day and age, I get to pay homage, but can't we be original?
yeah, I know. Well, that's the unfortunate thing with this movie, but hey, that's why we're going to be on to the next one.
Yes, Alien Romulus.
Yes, well, I just want to say I appreciate everyone listening, also watching,
Yes, please watch.
and I just want to say please stay safe and stay psycho.
Yes, absolutely. Stay psycho, everybody.